Wendy Trapaga was born in 1981. Her parents moved to Miami, Florida, in the USA, in 1979 year from Colombia. Wendy was Daddy's daughter. Her father adored her. For a 6-year-old girl, it was a big blow when her father died in a plane crash. The mother had to get a job as a school secretary to provide for herself and 2 children. Later, the mother remarried, and 3 more children were born in a new marriage. Wendy had to grow up early. As the eldest daughter, she took care of her brothers and sisters and helped her mother in everything. As a teenager, she began volunteering at a homeless shelter. After graduating from high school, Wendy entered the Beauty Academy in Miami, where she studied to be a makeup artist. In February 2000 of the second year, at the age of 20, the girl met Michelle and Scott at the Beauty Academy. Michelle was surrounded by female attention at the academy, which was attended mainly by girls, and there were few guys. He came to study on a motorcycle, and many students admired him. Wendy was modest, and Michelle liked it, and he began to communicate with her. The girl was pleased that Michelle singled her out. She felt special, and they started dating. For Wendy, it was her first love. Michelle was 10 years older than her, seemed to be a reliable adult man. He wanted to open his own beauty salon, and then a whole network of his salons. Michelle had big ambitions and plans. It was his determination and self-confidence that Wendy liked. Michelle promised her that he would help her unlock her potential as a makeup artist, and together they would be able to achieve a lot. They would have their own successful business in the field of beauty, and she believed him. A few months later, Andy moved in with him, and after that they got married, October 10th, 2002, and went on a honeymoon for 3 days. At 5:30 in the morning of October 14th, 2002, the phone rang in the house. Miriam, Wendy's mother, feeling alarmed, picked up the phone and heard the voice of her son-in-law Michelle, who asked where her daughter was. The mother was at a loss from such a question. Wendy and Michelle were on their honeymoon, and they were supposed to return from a trip that day. So why is he calling her? The woman has not seen her daughter since the wedding. She had talked to her on the phone the day before, and everything was fine. Wendy told her mother on the phone that they had returned from a trip to Key West, but had not yet reached their home in Miami. They booked a room for 1 night at a hotel near the airport in Miami. Mary asked her son-in-law what had happened between them. Michelle said that they quarreled at 5 in the morning, and Wendy left by car to her mother. He tried to call his wife several times, but she did not pick up the phone. The woman asked her son-in-law to call her as soon as he finds out something about Wendy. Miriam was worried about her daughter. The son-in-law's story turned out to be strange to her. The woman began to call her daughter, but she did not answer. At 6 o'clock in the morning on the 14th of October, a worker in the warehouse parking lot found the girl's body. She was covered in blood between the cars. He immediately called at 911. The police, who arrived at the scene of the crime, found the lifeless body of the girl. The victim's face was so disfigured that it was impossible to identify her. She had a lot of injuries on her face, neck, and head. There were a lot of blood splatters on the nearby cars, which means that the crime was committed in the parking lot. But the murder weapon was nowhere to be found. She had a purse with documents in the name of Wendy Trapaga. The girl's car, as it turned out, was nearby. It was empty, and no evidence was found in it. An autopsy of the body showed that Wendy received 20 blows with a blunt heavy object, presumably with a tire iron, and she was also strangled. There were bruises on his neck. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The medical examiner determined that she was killed between 3 and 5 o'clock in the morning. Toxicological examination showed that there was a high dose of sleeping pills and painkillers in her body, which she took a few hours before her death. This explained why there were no defensive wounds on the girl's body. She was passed out and didn't resist. Someone drugged her, took her there, and brutally beat her to death, and then strangled her, so as not to leave her any chance of survival, even though she was already dead. The police reported Wendy's murder to her husband and mother. The husband was heartbroken, and the girl's mother did not believe him. She had never liked Michel. He was 10 years older than his daughter, and always seemed arrogant, vain, hot-tempered, and aggressive. Mariam never understood what her beautiful and clever daughter found in this arrogant, cruel type, and he behaved like that in the presence of Mira herself. The woman dissuaded her daughter from dating him, but she was in love with him and did not listen to her mother. The mother did not like that they began to live together so quickly. The couple did not even have money. They rented a small apartment and slept on the floor. At the same time, despite the lack of money, Wendy took out $1 million life insurance policy and registered Michel as a beneficiary. Miriam didn't understand why they needed this insurance so urgently. They didn't even have children yet. But she saw that her daughter was happy and did not interfere in their relationship. In September, Wendy informed her mother that they were going to get married. She was only 21 years old. Her mother and stepfather asked her to postpone the wedding, finish her studies, and get back on her feet. And at the same time, their feelings with Michel will be tested for strength during this time. But Wendy wanted to get married as soon as possible because she was pregnant. In this situation, the mother had nowhere to go, and she gave her blessing to this marriage. The couple got married on October 10th, 2002 years ago, but Wendy did not even suspect what kind of monster she was planning to connect her life with. It turned out that Michel had a dark past. He had a previous criminal record. 6 years ago, he took part in an armed robbery and was also a small-time fraudster. Michel seemed suspicious to the police. He could have had a motive to kill his wife because of insurance, and he was called in for questioning. The man told investigators the same story, how they quarreled at 5 o'clock in the morning because of a false pregnancy, and the girl left, and he never saw her again, but there were serious inconsistencies. Wendy, according to the medical examiner's conclusion, was killed before 5 o'clock in the morning, as she could have quarreled with her husband at 5 in the morning, left for the parking lot, got drunk on pills, passed out for several hours, and was attacked. The detective was asked by Michel to take a DNA sample and undergo a polygraph test. He refused. Investigators began to carefully study the information about him. They studied the data on Michael's calls and found out that he called his ex several times that night. The geolocation information of both phones showed that they were at the crime scene at night. Detectives invited Michael's ex, 28-year-old Yolanda Sowery, for questioning. The woman claimed to know nothing about Wendy and her murder. The police had nothing against her, and they released Yolanda. Michel did not grieve for his wife. He immediately ran to the insurance company and wanted to get $1 million. But since the case was still being investigated, the insurance company refused to pay him money. Michel was beside himself with anger and believed that the insurance company had deceived him. He filed a civil lawsuit against the insurance company and demanded money. When Wendy's family found out about this trial, they decided that they would not allow him to receive this blood money. At that time, they had no doubt that he was the one who killed Wendy for $1 million. During this trial, he had to tell about the events of that night. Michel was confused in his testimony, as a result of which a criminal case was initiated against him in 2005 year. Michel was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Wendy. He lost the court on the recovery of $1 million from the insurance company. The money was paid to Wendy's mother. Investigators began to collect evidence and were sure that Michel killed Wendy, and Yolanda helped him, since they were both at the crime scene. Michel denied any involvement in the murder and did not want to cooperate with the investigation. Then, the detectives began to work with Yolanda. They hoped that she would reveal the whole truth about the murder. In the 2011 year, the police called her for questioning and told her information that they had correspondence between her and Michel, in which they hinted at the murder of Wendy. They have confirmation that Michelle and Yolanda called that night and were at the crime scene. Yolanda, having learned this, agreed to cooperate with the investigation and began to talk. The suspect said that when Michelle began dating Wendy, he was not yet free. The man had been in a relationship with her for 2 years. Yolanda was the mother of a little girl she gave birth to from a previous relationship. She and Michelle met at programming classes that he attended before the beauty academy. They had been living together for over a year, and Michelle treated her daughter like his own. Yolanda at that time could not imagine that Michelle, while living with her, was dating Wendy. They were planning a wedding and saving money, as well as making joint plans for the future. Michelle was telling her to wait and they would be fine. In July 2002, he broke up with Yolanda without explanation and moved in with Wendy. It turned out that he was not the reliable, serious man that he seemed to her. Michelle was frivolous and infantile. In his 30s, he was still in search of himself, did not work anywhere, constantly changed his place of study, and was looking for easy money. Yolanda couldn't figure out where he had gone. She was looking for him and worried that something might have happened to him. She was able to hack into his email and saw a message from Wendy there. Then, Yolanda understood everything. Michelle cheated on her for several months and left her for a new girlfriend. She was angry. The woman found him and decided to find out from him personally why he exchanged her for another. Michelle admitted that he went to another girl, but he only loves her. He has an insidious plan. Michelle said that Wendy's life was insured for a large sum. He wants to kill Wendy and get $1 million, and then he would return to Yolanda, and they wouldn't need anything. At first, Yolanda was shocked by this statement, but she loved him so much that she decided to wait for him to return to her. She was pleased that Michelle still loved her and wanted to be with her. Yolanda lived with the thought, and she didn't even think about killing Wendy and didn't warn anyone. A few days later, Michelle himself called her and asked for help. Michelle asked her to help develop a murder plan to fake an accident. They began to think about which way of killing would be better. Initially, they planned to pump Wendy with alcohol or pills and drown her to fake that she drank a lot and drowned in the bathroom. But this plan collapsed when Wendy felt the pills in the drink on the last day of the honeymoon. Michelle didn't know what to do, and out of desperation, contacted Yolanda again. She sent him money. According to their new plan, on October 13th, Michelle and Wendy stayed at the airport hotel for one more night. He rented a room with his ex's money. Wendy called her mother and told her that they would be back tomorrow, and that day, they planned to have dinner at a restaurant, go to a movie, and then to a club. But her husband had other plans for that evening and night. Michelle and Wendy had dinner and returned to the hotel. He slipped pills into her drink, and she passed out. He quietly carried her out of the room through another exit and put her in the car. It was already night. They drove past Yolanda's house as agreed with her. Yolanda, seeing Michelle with Wendy, followed their car in her car. Wendy was unconscious in the front passenger seat. Michelle pulled into the deserted parking lot behind the warehouse and signaled Yolanda to come later. When Yolanda returned 20 minutes later, she saw Michelle walking down the street. He got into the car and she noticed blood on his clothes. In his hands was a tire iron covered in blood, which he wiped with a rag. They drove to the river. According to Yolanda, he threw the tire iron into the river and washed himself of the blood in the water. At that time, Yolanda was sitting in the car and a police car drove up to them. She was very scared. The patrolman asked what she was doing in such a place so late at night. And the woman said that her boyfriend was sick, and she stopped the car so that he came to himself. The patrolman believed her and left. Michelle changed his clothes and threw his dirty clothes in the trash, and Yolanda took him to the apartment, and she went to her home. Then, Michelle called Wendy's mother and asked the woman where her daughter was. After Wendy's murder, Michelle really moved in with Yolanda, as promised, but life was not happy either. Michelle attacked her and strangled her. He threatened to kill her if she reported him, and reminded her that she was an accomplice to murder. The woman didn't know what to do. She was afraid that Michelle might kill her as well as Wendy, and broke up with him on the pretext that they did not need to shine together. But she was afraid to testify against him. The police offered her an excellent deal, full immunity, in exchange for her testimony at the trial, and also promised her that they would not bring charges of complicity. Then Yolanda agreed. The trial began in the year 2014, 12 years after the murder of Wendy. Michelle refused a lawyer and decided that he would defend himself, although he had no legal education and experience as a lawyer. At the trial, he mumbled something incoherent. Many of his incorrect questions were rejected by the judge. Because of this, Michelle was angry and snapped at everyone, threatened Wendy's mother and other participants in the trial. He was charged with contempt of court and given 30 days in prison. Later, he did get his lawyer back. Michelle claimed at the trial that he did not know what happened to Wendy. He said that Wendy was dating other men and went to the club that night alone. Then she came back in the morning. They quarreled, and Wendy left. He believed that she ran into some scoundrel in the parking lot who attacked and killed her. But his story had no confirmation. The hotel staff didn't see Wendy leave at 5 in the morning. The surveillance cameras didn't record it either. And also his story contradicted the facts. According to the conclusion of the medical examiner, the girl was killed earlier, and a few hours before that, she had drunk a lot of pills and was passed out. A high dose of sleeping pills and painkillers was found in her body. After them, she wouldn't be able to drive. The prosecution also provided its evidence, calls between Yolanda and Michelle on the night of the murder, and their geolocation. This couple was constantly on the phone and was at the scene of the crime. Michelle couldn't explain what he was doing at the crime scene at night. He claimed that he had never been there before, and also claimed that the calls of the former were related to concern about the health of her little daughter, who was allegedly ill at the time. But Yolanda herself denied it. The prosecution provided an important piece of evidence, a business card of the motorcycle salon where Michelle bought his motorcycle, with his fingerprints, was found at the crime scene. How could she have been at the crime scene if he had never been there? The most important evidence against Michelle was the testimony of Yolanda, who told in detail about their plan. She didn't see suicide and doesn't know what he did with Wendy, but she saw blood and a tire iron. Divers were able to find her at the bottom of the river. It matched the murder weapon, but the water washed away all possible evidence from it. Yolanda also said that the pregnancy test that Wendy did was fake. He was replaced by Michelle in order to marry her as soon as possible. The girl has never been pregnant. Michelle ridiculed his ex at the trial, tried to grieve her. He claimed that no man in his right mind would change the beautiful girl Wendy with a model appearance for a more adult ugly woman with a child. Michelle accused Yolanda of killing Wendy. He claimed that it was the ex who killed his wife in order to take revenge on her and eliminate a rival. Yolanda even burst into tears at the trial because of this. She insisted that the plan was developed by Michelle because of the money, and he did not grieve after his death, but immediately ran for insurance payments. The jury, after 3 hours of deliberation, found 42-year-old Michelle guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the right to parole. Also, Wendy's family filed a civil lawsuit against Michelle for wrongful death in the 2013 year. The court found Michelle guilty and sentenced him to pay the family of the murdered $44 million. But of course he doesn't have that money, and Wendy's family doesn't even hope to get them. They were pleased with the verdict and glad that finally, after many years, justice had triumphed for their daughter. If you liked my work, subscribe to the channel, support this video with a like. Let's discuss this story in the comments. Thank you all, and bye.